Hello, Mr. Lacroix. I'm very pleased to meet you here as Dean of CEIBS. You are a fascinating character, CEO and leader. You have just published Leadership with Soul. That's amazing. And you even had a Chinese version. So just before we go into a short series of questions about this fascinating Leadership with Soul, would you introduce yourself? You've been in different companies, cultures, different countries, different roles.
The book is the project of my life. When I was a little kid, I wanted to become a surgeon. I thought that saving people's life was the best thing I could ever do. And one day, by magic, I met a CEO of a medium-sized company who opened my mind to the importance of being a leader. He basically shared with me an important insight that leadership is achieving great things through people. That conversation over dinner in that beautiful spring of 1978, so it's a long time ago, did make me think, and I changed my mind and I went into business, believing that it was an opportunity for me to also make a real difference in the world. And it's only very late in my career, when I started to become a leader, that I reconciled my humanist, instinct with my appetite to do big things and contribute to the greater good of the world. I've been very fortunate to work for some of the best companies in the world: Colgate, PepsiCo, Burger King, Diageo. I was CEO of Disneyland in Paris. I worked in the automotive industry. Today, I'm based in London, running Intertek, working on helping society to be much better in terms of quality, safety, and sustainability. So I'm the luckiest CEO on the planet. So that's who I am. I'm André.
Thank you so much, André. And I must say that any leader has to be intrigued by the title, Leadership with Soul, and putting people at the heart. And I was wondering whether there would be something possible, like defining what leadership with soul is. It must not be an easy task, but I'm sure you've been thinking about it a lot.
I'm very demanding on myself, very demanding on the world, very demanding on what I see everywhere. And my harsh conclusion is that companies today are overmanaged and underled. There is too much macro-management and not enough inspirational leadership. And that's why most companies are not unleashing their full potential. And what the corporate world, in my view, needs is good leadership. Now, this is my analysis after many years of working in all the companies that we talked about. But when you look at the data, there is a company called Gallup that is the authority in terms of workplace science. And what they say when they measure engagement around the world is that they say that 77% of the global workforce is not engaged, which means that you have 2.7 billion employees every single day waking up and going to the workplace without putting their heart and soul in their job. That level of disengagement is a crisis in the corporate world. And I believe that the solution is good leadership. And my formula for good leadership is simple. The only way to unleash the full potential of your business, doesn't matter how big it is, small, local, global, private, or public, is to put people at the heart of your growth strategy. Good leadership is achieving great things through people. You cannot achieve great things unless you put people first. That's essentially what Leadership with Soul is all about. And the book is an invitation for existing and future leaders to stop and think on what it takes to become a good leader. That's what it is.
Your book has also been out in Chinese. And I was wondering, being the Dean of CEIBS, China Europe International Business School, what it is that you would tell Chinese leaders that they can take away when they are thinking themselves about going global. Is the book, would you say, fully relevant? And where is that relevance?
We've been presenting Leadership with Soul to several universities around the world. And the reason why I'm starting with universities and business schools is because attracting the best talent is where it starts to drive, strong performance in any company. And what's been fascinating through these hundreds of hours of discussions with MBA students, engineers, scientists from Latin America, US, Europe, China, Asia, Vietnam, Australia, is every single young person asks the same questions. What is it that you need to do to become an effective leader in the corporate world? And the question is very, very important because these young people have seen their parents, their grandparents lose their jobs several times in their careers because somewhere in these companies where their parents and grandparents worked, people prioritize short-term profit to the long-term greater good of the company. And there is a huge disillusion within the young generations on how well corporations are managed and what it takes to be successful in today's world in a company. So the book essentially touches on some of the fundamental questions that people need to have in mind when they join a company, which is future talents. And this is very important for any Chinese, leader operating in China or outside of China, because attracting and developing the great talents in the world is where you get your competitive advantage first and foremost. That's my conviction. The second thing that the book does, essentially, it dissects or decomposes or frames some of the big challenges that companies face in terms of driving sustainable growth and performance. And that will help, obviously, leaders in China to understand how their subsidiaries around the world will work, but also how their customers and suppliers think about business. But in every chapter, I talked about the theory, but also lots of business cases. And the business cases that I've chosen are all business cases that I've experienced myself. And that will be very, very insightful because they are real, success stories or failures in a grand scale. So that's what I would say the book can do for Chinese leaders, helping you understand how talent, think about the corporate world, understanding how companies think about their strategic operational challenges, but also learning from very, very simple stories that I've lived myself.
It's so true, because when you read the book, and that's how I felt, what you read is not theory about leadership with soul, but how somebody, a leader with soul, is talking about and looking back in terms of his experience. You were just saying that you've been talking to a lot of young people asking you about effective leadership. But when you're talking maybe also with other leaders, did you notice that there was anything or one thing or several things that leaders really tend to get wrong, or they don't do enough when they are engaging their teams?
The first thing I would say, and it will be obvious, but I'm going to say it because it's so important. You've got to work super hard. The world today is ultra competitive. There are many people in different companies within your direct competitive set or non-direct competitive sets that are frankly working hard to take you out of business. They want to really take your market share and really push you out of the market. And the compounding power of working really hard at becoming very effective leaders cannot be underestimated, because it's hard to become a good leader. And you never stop reinventing yourself. You never stop challenging yourself on what you can do differently. To me, there are two questions I've asked myself every single day, multiple times in meetings, phone conversations, dinner, breakfast. The what? Are we doing the right thing? Are we strategically on the right track? And how do people feel? And if I've not answered yes and yes to both questions, I'm not happy. And by the way, when I wake up the next morning, I said, yes, you said yes to 1 and 2, but what could you do differently tomorrow to be ever better? So work super hard to become ever better, because that's, the only way to stay fit and competitive in the marketplace. The second thing I would say, be humble. The corporate world will be a much better place without egos. And people need to understand, especially when they're in a leadership role, that without their people, they are nothing. I'm a big fan of Greek philosophers, and there is one thing that I learned from Socrates very early on in my life is the only thing I know is I don't know everything. If as a leader, you go into a meeting, a discussion with your team, recognizing that you have a good sense of what's happening, but you don't know everything, then it makes you very humble, and it makes you an effective leader. And frankly, you will be more likely to engage with your colleagues if they really know that you care about hearing what they have to say. You care about getting their views into your own brains and thinking, and as a team, getting something that is really, really powerful. There is no more powerful than getting into situations with a lot of issues, a blank piece of paper, where at the end of the meeting together you find a solution. The third thing, I would say is you've got to stay open-minded and to stay curious. I've noticed over the years that the most successful leaders in terms of continuous growth to maximize their potentials are the leaders that are always curious, always interested in what's new, what's the next big, challenge, because they are fundamentally more creative. So if I were to say, in 3 tips, what it is to be an effective leader today: work super hard, it's ultra competitive, stay humble, never believe in your own story, and please put your ego outside of your day-to-day agenda. And 3, really, really, really stay open, be curious, and look for ever better solutions all the time.
Thank you for these very 3 important tips, because I must say, when you read the book, you've got this everywhere, and you this vibration, which is not an easy vibration to speak about, like a contrast in a way between being demanding, and that goes well with the competitive environment you've just talked about, and on the other hand, you have the humbleness, the humility, the modesty that is so key, and striking the balance between the two is a very difficult exercise that I must say personally I learned very much about, because it's helping the leader developing the vision, developing the style, and remaining always open, looking and seeking opportunities. Now, being a dean in a business school, and you came to CEIBS yourself for a masterclass, and what do you think that can be learned in business schools in that very important area, leadership?
There is nothing that we cannot learn as human beings. Through our life, learning starts at primary school, maybe kindergarten, and stop the moment you decided not to be curious and not to be open-minded and becoming an ever leader. And this is a long life experience. When it comes to the discipline of leadership at business schools, look, there is a lot that can be done at this stage. These are the years where people are starting to think in big terms about their career, framing their character in many cases, and certainly trying to understand what it is to be, successful in life. For me, the discipline of leadership is as important as mathematics, physics, finance. It's one of the key disciplines in the world, in corporations, but also in public life. The world today would be a much better place if we had good leadership everywhere. Can you imagine if you had much better leaders in all public institutions governing the world? We would be in a much better place. Only good leadership combined with science and finance and research and all the other disciplines that we teach at business schools is the formula moving forward. So if I had to give an advice to any dean, I would say, look at the curriculum that your students are going through. What's the percentage of learning time is truly dedicated to that discipline of good leadership? And if it's 1%, it's not enough. If it's 5%, it's too low. And if it's 10%, it starts being interesting. I've been through the learning process myself. I remember extremely well the moment I moved from a single contributor to a team leader. I had to figure out, wow, I didn't touch leadership much at my business school at the time. There was no course on leadership, as a matter of fact. I've never attended any leadership course. I've observed people doing it well or not so well. So now I'm going to try myself. And that's not good enough. Because the moment a single contributor becomes a team leader, that person has got a different remit. And there is a huge gap in terms of academic, training, in my view, but also corporate training, in terms of what good leadership is all about. So that's what I'm trying to do, to help, existing and future leaders figure out leadership is difficult, but it's fascinating. And by the way, it's exhilarating, because achieving great things through people is giving you tons of energy and satisfaction, right? So minimum 10% of the curriculum on leadership would be my recommendation to any business school around the world. And I don't think that's the case.
No, you're right. And it's, of course, deans are very much taken by 10% on ESG, 10% on AI, 10% on marketing. And of course, there are situations, but I fully agree with you. And I share that view that leadership is sometimes under-taught in schools. I like in the book when you're talking exactly about the necessity to invest time in this. I like also, I think there is somewhere in the book where you're talking about the magic of talent planning. And as you said, with your example of somebody moving from a role of single contributor to a leadership role, sometimes people are not so much accompanied by systems. Now that makes me come to another question, because you've been in so many different companies. Sometimes you have CEOs and leaders who've spent their lifetime and work time in the same organization. But here we have with you a case where we have somebody who's been in different company and different cultures. And the question that comes is, what part does company culture play with leadership? When you move from one company culture to another, do you have to reset everything, or are there core principles that apply everywhere? How does that work?
For me, the culture of a company is the DNA of the company. That's the glue that binds all of us together, right? That's the fuel that energizes us to take the company, moving forward. And somebody very famous, Drucker, says that, culture eats strategy for breakfast. The fact that success in business is 1% strategy, 99% execution. And what is execution of a strategy? It's essentially, do you have the right processes? Do you have the right measurements? Do you have the right talents? Of course, do you have the right initiatives? But do you have the right culture to create an ecosystem where everybody is aligned, everybody has the right behaviors to drive, performance? And it's essential to understand what your culture is all about. At Intertek, we talk about having a 10x culture. We don't want to be simply better than what we did yesterday. We want to be 10 times better than what we did yesterday. We don't want to be simply better than the competition. We want to be 10 times better. And we took the time at Intertek to define what are the key attributes of our culture. We want to be ingenious. It's all about innovation, creativity, inspirations. We want to be caring for each other, caring for our people, caring for the planet, caring for our customers, right? We want to be trusted, because as a company, if you're not trusted by all your stakeholders, then how do you succeed? We want, to be thriving. getting things done very fast on a grand scale in a much better way than your competitors, right? And finally, we want to be ever better, always finding the next big idea. You've got to make sure that your culture is a dynamic set of behaviors, because the world is not static. If you don't reinvent yourself, you don't basically, max out, because there is always someone to take you out of business. So I'm passionate about it. And the two questions that I was talking about earlier, are we doing the right things and how do people feel? Well, without the right culture, how can you answer these two questions? What's really, really, really important for me, and this is a different angle to the importance of culture, is when students finish, their curriculum and start to look for a new role. When I talk to young colleagues around the world and students, I says, look, your first role is paramount to your future. When you look for new roles, your careers, make sure you take the time to do your homework. A few things you need to get right. Make sure you join the right company in terms of business model, in terms of growth, in terms of track record, and make sure that you can contribute to that. But finally, the most important area, can you enjoy the culture of that company? Not everyone can work in any type of culture. There are very big differences, between corporations around the world. So as a CEO and leader, understanding the culture you want to establish in your company and benchmarking that and working on it to get it better is very important. But as an employee, you've got to basically select the companies where you feel the culture is the type of culture that you would enjoy. It's essential. I mean, we are not robots, we are human beings. And the culture is this fuel that get us going, that binds us all together.
André, maybe another question. You are not a full-time leadership scholar, and you've written a wonderful book on leadership with soul. You're a CEO, you have a very busy agenda every day, and I know that you are taking the time to develop yourself, your future leaders, and that is, of course, making a lot of sense when you read the book. I also heard that you're practicing leadership with soul and body. And would you tell us more? Because I think that what you say is very compatible with, of course, there is the soul, there is also the heart.
The model that is in the book, Leadership with Soul, was born in 2002, many, many years ago, when someone asked me to talk about my way of leading teams and achieving great results when I was at Burger King. And till then, I basically had been taking notes and working very hard on the areas that I could get better step by step. And I had a little book where, I would write on one side of the books successes, mistakes, events, and then on the other side of the books, conceptualizing these in terms of learning of what I should do more of or less of. And I still have these books on my desk at home. And then I created the model to basically explain what was defining my leadership approach. And then we talked about it. I'm a humanist in action. I believe that putting people at the heart of what you do in your growth strategy is the only way to take your business to greater height for the short, medium, and long term. Demonstrating to yourself that you can do it and working on it has been a way of life. And it still is, every single day. I always had the view that at one day it would be good to write a book and share these so that other people could benefit from your experience. And I wrote one manuscript when I left Euro Disney. I worked on the second manuscript when I left Inchcape. And when I came at Intertek, we felt, with my HR colleague Tony George, that the discipline of leadership had to be taught in a fundamental way within all of our existing and future leaders. And I said to Tony, my head of HR, says, look, as you know, I've got this project, writing a book. I've got the model. I've got manuscript number 2. Why don't we take the manuscript number 2 and why don't I turn that into a training program? And as a matter of fact, before writing the book and publishing the book, I've been teaching the content of Leadership with Soul to hundreds of existing and future leaders. And typically, it's a full week. We arrive on Monday, we finish on Friday. I do it, the Greek way. I'm talking the way philosophers in Greece were basically sharing their insights, verbal transmission. There is no PowerPoint, there is no technology, there is no video, there is no reports. I basically stand in front of 100 colleagues for a full week in 13 lectures of 45, 90 minutes sometimes, sharing what Leadership with Soul is all about, going through every single principle, explaining the theory, giving examples. After every single principle, they have obviously the opportunity to work and do exercise. And then we wrap up the week with a fabulous morning, where the night before that morning, we ask them to take all the notes they have on their pads, think about what they've learned, and writing a leadership promise to themselves on what they're going to do differently after that week and trying to become a good leader. And the next morning, they give us the essays, which we'll review with our colleagues here. And we ask each of them to stand up and in 1 minute to share with their colleagues their own leadership promise. It is so rich. And of course, we finish with Q&As. And I never knew that teaching something you believe in will be so fulfilling, so rewarding. That's why I love going meeting students and giving a glimpse of what Leadership with Soul is, because sharing, transmitting is very rewarding, because essentially you contribute to the future of the world. And out of this training program, I wrote the book. So it's an interesting journey. So the book is essentially the product of many, many years of introspection, thinking, analysis, writing, but also the book was much easier to write, by the way, after having taught the content several times.
That's very true. I like very much your approach to this. And this is always in the book. What I think is very strong is you're saying, remain with facts. And you've got to stick to this. And having written this book, which I think you read it as an experience, you read it also as a textbook, guiding you on the way to better leadership. And it's like a PhD originally, Philosophia a Doctor, which means somebody who experienced things, somebody who can teach it. And I think I found with a lot of philosophical sense. And thank you very much for this great delivery and great book again, Leadership with Soul. Thank you so much, André.
Thank you, and thanks for having us. Thank you very much.